Able Australia published a report in 2011 about access to telecommunications for deafblind Australians. The report was completed through funding received from the Australian Communications Consumer Action Network. The project was overseen by a steering committee consisting of consumers, service providers and researchers. The research aims were to identify access to telecommunications for people experiencing deafblindness in Australia, to identify barriers and limitations to accessing telecommunication devices and make recommendations to ACAN to improve the current situation, to develop a web-based resource to assist people who are deafblind make informed choices around telecommunication options. The method used to research this project was a nationwide survey of people with deafblindness. The survey was distributed in late 2010 to identify the uptake of telecommunication devices. The results of the survey presented a picture of overwhelmingly low use of telecommunication devices by Australians who are deafblind. There are no telecommunication devices accessible to people with deafblindness on the list for approved devices in any state's aid and equipment program, despite the dependence of these devices to meet basic communication safety needs, a universal right for all people.
I'd like to show a few examples of telecommunication devices that people with deafblindness are able to use. Hopefully, this will demonstrate some of the barriers and limitations they face.
AbleLink is a unique e-communications facility located in the city of Melbourne for people living with deafblindness, incorporating a drop-in centre, training and access to state-of-the-art adaptive communication technologies. People with deafblindness can learn to use a PC, Mac, laptop or mobile phone with a variety of adaptive technologies including large monitors, magnification software, large print or braille keyboards, speech software to read the screen, CCTV and TTY phones with visual displays, just to name a few.
The first device is called a Braille TTY. This was introduced in about 1990 and is currently funded by the Telstra Disability Equipment Program. The TTY can ring another TTY or make a call via the National Relay Service. For a person with deafblindness living alone, it's an absolutely essential communication device. Without this, they wouldn't be able to live independently. And the other good thing about the Braille TTY is that it's a standalone device and not dependent on internet access. However, it has quite a few disadvantages and challenges for a person with deafblindness. Because the text is scrolling at the pace that a person is typing, very few people with deafblindness can read the Braille at that speed. The Braille is only in grade 1, making the reading even slower. It's got a fairly clunky interface, making it difficult to navigate backward and forward through the conversation. And to fit with the Braille, this actual TTY device is not a standard Australian TTY device. So the command structure is different. Therefore, training and learning it is quite a challenge. There's been ongoing maintenance issues with this device, requiring it constantly to be serviced. And being 20 years old, it has not evolved to embrace emerging technologies. It's basically the same unit as it was 20 years ago. The mobile phone. Less than half the respondents of the survey have a mobile phone. The mobile phone is not funded under the existing Disability Equipment Program by Telstra. With a mobile phone, the deafblind person can use SMS to provide easy communication. It also has a really simple layout for the internet and email, and it makes it a lot easier to read, both with magnification and in Braille. It can also be configured to be a really handy face-to-face communication device, which is great for a deafblind person to have some autonomy to be able to communicate directly or to be able to use it when there are no interpreters available. Now, up until quite recently, mobile phones were quite a challenge, but the iPhone has been able to overcome lots and lots of obstacles. It's the first mainstream device that's been brought out with inbuilt accessibility. It includes magnification, speech and braille output. The accessibility options are very, very impressive. It also offers a range of text input. It includes the touchscreen on the phone, which can actually be learned by someone with no sight and no hearing, which is pretty amazing. It also has a wireless keyboard, which could provide an alternative keyboard in face-to-face communication, or it makes a really easy access for someone with low vision who can't manage the touchscreen. And it also can be used with a braille keyboard so that the deafblind person can just type in braille rather than learning the touchscreen or using a wireless keyboard. So it offers lots and lots of options for the range of disabilities that people have. And that's the secret to a lot of these devices, is that they need to be customisable and they must have a range of options. The Nokia mobile phone, now a couple of years ago this was state of the art, and now it already looks terribly, terribly unsophisticated. It's a really good example of how difficult it is to keep up to date with technology. But the Nokia has been around for a while. It requires additional software to be purchased and downloaded and installed and configured. And this software provides magnification, speech and braille output. It's a fairly difficult device to learn, but it works and it provides access to a mobile phone, which is sensational. It only really provides access to SMS. The software isn't robust enough to navigate the internet or email. It was a great option when it came out, but I feel like it's already been superseded by the iPhone. I think in the near future, smartphones will have inbuilt accessibility on the Android system, but that's not the case at the moment. If they have fairly good functional vision, a person can use magnification reasonably well on a mobile phone. They need training in how to access the keyboard and how to type everything in properly, but with the CCTV to magnify the keyboard and the phone, and with good training they can actually learn how to do it. If someone has no vision, they're reliant on their hearing, and they may be able to use the speech output. And the speech output is fairly easy to learn as well, and there's a lot of good support within the blind community for learning devices using speech output. But then there are some deafblind people who have no speech and no hearing, or they're heading that way, and they are just completely locked out. They're locked out of using their vision, they're locked out of using their hearing, and all they can really do is learn braille and use braille for these devices to stay connected to the world. And at the moment there's a very small number of deafblind people who have mastered braille. Now, it's not because it's a terribly difficult language to learn. It is basically just learning the alphabet. But they don't really have access to training in braille because the blindness agencies can't afford interpreters. And because of their complex communication needs, and because of sometimes their literacy, using English as a second language, the braille materials need to be modified to cope with effective teaching strategies for people with deafblindness. These reasons have manifested in very low numbers of deafblind people who read braille. Now, this is a huge problem as a person gets older, particularly as their sight is the last thing to go, really, and they just become extremely isolated and extremely cut off from the world. So it's a very high priority for deafblind people to learn braille, to have access to braille technology, and to be able to read the newspapers and their emails and the internet and books in braille. It's very encouraging to see that these devices can work almost as good as anything else with braille accessibility. So that's the challenge for ensuring that deafblind people have full access and participation in society. that if they don't have functional vision or functional hearing, that they need to be able to access these braille devices and get the adequate funding in terms of buying the equipment and in terms of getting access to training.
Australia is not providing adequate support in the way of funding, training and access to information about devices to meet the unique needs of this diverse group. Communication is a right enshrined in the United Nations Convention Rights for People with Disabilities. The recommendations of this report include expanding the Disability Equipment Program to include technology for mobile and internet and mobile plans, guidelines on accessibility standards, guidelines for customising devices, centres to showcase accessible devices, ongoing research and development. That funding of the National Auslan Booking Service include interpreter support for deaf-blind people to undertake Braille training. That training of NRS relay officers and NRS equipment and procedures be reviewed to ensure the best quality of service is available to deaf-blind users. That telecommunication retailers educate all staff on the accessibility features of their products. This report provides an insight into the current access deaf-blind Australians have to telecommunications and the limitations and barriers that they face. It is our hope that the findings and recommendations contained in this report will assist government and consumer organisations with future communications policy development. A copy of the report can be downloaded from our website www.ableaustralia.org.au.